Have you ever spent an outrageous amount of money on really super extra nice watercolor panels and aquaboard or heavyweight cotton watercolor paper and then took one look at it and thought, I can't paint on this, I'll ruin it? Is that super extra nice watercolor paper now sitting in your closet somewhere collecting dust because you're too afraid to try painting on it? My name is Emily, by the way, and here on my channel we do painting tutorials, art supply reviews, and we talk about all things watercolor. So if that sounds good to you, hit that subscribe button right now. There's this quote that goes, paint is only wasted if it stays in the tube. And I think this can also be applied to watercolor paper. It's only wasted if it stays blank. But I get it. Good quality watercolor paper can be expensive. Watercolor boards like aquaboards or watercolor paper panels are even more costly. They are so beautiful and pristine, and you just don't want to waste them by making a bad painting on those surfaces. So in today's video, I want to talk about how we can use our expensive watercolor papers without having a mini panic attack. For my examples today, I have three very nice, rather expensive surfaces I want to show you. The first one is an Artifacts Charta panel. These were actually sent to me by Anton from Artifacts, and this small 8x10" ACM panel is $20 on their website. So this is a super nice panel. Very high quality. It's a hard board with Arches cotton paper seamlessly glued to the panel. So of course the advantage is that it will respond just like your normal amazing Arches paper, but without the annoyance of the paper warping or buckling when it's wet. So even though these were literally given to me, I still feel this sense of, whoa, these are super nice. I want to make sure I do a really good painting on these. Definitely don't want to waste these guys. My second super nice surface here is a cradled wood panel by New York Central Professional Watercolor Panels. I got this panel from Jerry's Artorama. This one is 12 by 16 inches, Arches 140-pound hot pressed paper mounted to a 7/8 of an inch Da Vinci Pro birch panel. This is considered a museum quality archival surface that is also non-buckling and can be hung up frameless. This panel was about $23. The third surface I have here is a half sheet of Arches 140-pound cold pressed paper, which I took the time to stretch and dry using gummed tape on a gator board. Now the 140-pound paper is cheaper than the heavyweight stuff, but requires this added step of pre-stretching the paper so that it doesn't warp like crazy. This extra bit of work has me feeling really invested in this piece of paper, and whatever I paint on it needs to turn out. So it was worth all that effort, right? Other expensive watercolor surfaces definitely include the aqua boards, your classic cotton watercolor paper panels like this one, and even cotton watercolor paper blocks, especially in a larger size. Normally we have no problem burning through multiple sheets of our cheaper watercolor papers, but when we get out the good stuff, it makes us stop and think twice. Maybe we're even second guessing our own competency as an artist. Like, am I really good enough to even use this paper? Absolutely, yes you are. Here is the key to using your expensive watercolor supplies without fear. I have one word for you: preparation. The more you practice and prepare, the more confident you will be when the time comes to put down marks on those fine and costly surfaces. The goal is to create something that at the very least won't end up in the trash, and at the very best might even be a competition-worthy piece, a gift for a loved one, or just a painting that you can proudly hang in your house. Here are 5 things that I often do to prepare for painting on an expensive surface. I don't usually do all of these steps for every painting, but they're all super helpful preparatory tools to ensure a successful painting. Number 1, choose a great reference photo. For my Charta panel painting, which is an 8x10" panel, I decided to use this beautiful image of hydrangeas. This is a photo I snapped myself while on the Oregon coast with my sister. I didn't have to do any photoshopping with this. It was just a perfect image as it was. For the painting for my New York Central Art Supply panel, which is 12 by 16 inches, I decided to use this gorgeous portrait image of my daughter. These are photos that I intentionally took for painting. I was planning ahead for paintings, and I wanted to make sure that my photos were really good quality, super crisp and clear with beautiful soft background elements. The quality of the photo really matters so much. This third image looks a little strange because I photoshopped it quite a bit. We'll talk about that in the next step. But for my half sheet of Arches 140-pound cotton watercolor paper, which I stretched and prepared, this is the image I chose for that. Number 2, retouch the photo. Change colors, take out elements and shapes, design before you dive in. I did quite a bit of retouching for my photo of Ansley in front of the trumpet flowers. First of all, I resized it to exactly 12 by 16 inches, 300 DPI, and this is important because I planned on either printing it to trace it or doing a one-to-one grid drawing of it so that I could get a really accurate drawing on my watercolor panel. That's what those grids are for that you see stretched across the photo. I also moved around some of the flowers in the background until I got some shapes that I was really pleased with. I also played around with different filters just to see what it would look like with modified colors and more idealistic lighting. The image I did the most photoshopping with was this one of my daughter by the pond. I actually adjusted the background somewhat using a tool called a harmonic armature. There's actually a channel on YouTube that discusses this in length, and I think it's such a useful tool if you want to create harmony in shapes within your image. And with photos, of course, you have to do a lot of manipulation. You have to kind of know how to do that. Fortunately, I've been using Photoshop for many years. I can definitely make rudimentary changes in Photoshop. They're not perfect, but they definitely help me visualize what I want my final result to be. So with the harmonic armature, I was lining up different locations like her elbow, the center of her body, and where her dress meets her feet here. There were just little points in the image that could be improved with a little bit of pushing and pulling. So that's where that came in. And you can see I actually photoshopped her face. You can see this is the actual original image, and obviously she's making a really funny face here. So I took another photograph and stuck that over the top, and my background was adjusted quite a bit. You can see I pulled the shoreline of the pond upward a little bit to make it more of a harmonious shape. I took out this building back here, and then I also took out this really kind of eyesore of a tree that was right here. You can see it looks a lot better without that. And then one more important change I made was that the milkweed here in the front wasn't a very beautiful plant all by itself, so I actually stuck another flower right in front of it. And of course, some modifications were going to be required with the leaves, but I figured I could just do that with my own drawing and painting. It doesn't have to be a perfect Photoshop, but all of this effort really helps me visualize what the final result is going to be, even though the painting is going to be even more refined than the Photoshop job. Number 3. Create a thumbnail sketch in pencil to map out your values and your overall composition. Doing quick thumbnail sketches in pencil is one of the best ways you can test out your values and also just practice moving elements around that maybe you couldn't do in Photoshop. You can use your pencil to press hard where you want to have darker values, and you can leave areas of light, and you can erase if necessary. With watercolor, you can't erase it, so this is your playground for testing out your composition. Number 4, do a thumbnail sketch in colors. The advantages to doing a color study, in addition to a black and white one, are that you can test out combinations of colors. You can decide if it's too blue or too red or too something, and save yourself a lot of time by testing out the colors first on a cheap piece of paper before jumping into your painting and potentially going inadvertently too dark, too colorful, or just using colors you decide later you really didn't like. It's also a really good idea to swatch your colors ahead of time and test those out. Here I did a color thumbnail sketch using colored pencils, but you could definitely do this with your watercolors as well. In fact, that would probably be better if you're intending to do a watercolor painting, because it would be more true to the colors you're going to use for the actual painting. Number 5. Try to predict which areas of the painting will be tricky for you, and practice those areas on cheaper but similar paper. For example, transitions between elements where the edges are important, skin tones, backgrounds, etc. Practicing is ultimately the most helpful thing you can do to give you the confidence you need to paint the real thing. The more you practice, the easier it will get. Now for my hydrangea, I did a couple of quick color studies on a cheap piece of paper just to test out how I wanted the soft edges to flow between the purple flowers and the green leaves. This was also helping me choose colors for the flowers themselves since I wasn't quite sure. I really loved how this painting turned out, and I know that that was because of the preparation I did ahead of time. By the way, the full-length version of this hydrangea tutorial is available through my Watercolor Mastery membership. It includes the reference photo, the traceable line drawing, and a complete list of the supplies used in the tutorial. Before doing my portrait of Ansley, I did a complete color study portrait ahead of time, again to test out my colors and see what works. This was also good practice for the drawing itself since she has kind of a Mona Lisa expression. Once I was comfortable with my color choices, I did a grid drawing on cheap printer paper and then used transfer paper to transfer this to my watercolor panel. At some point, you do just have to dive right in, so that's what I did. I started with my blue colors. If you want to learn more about this approach to portraits, check out this video. For my final example here, this is that half sheet of paper, the portrait of Ansley by the pond. I did 3 different studies in watercolor before diving into the big painting. My first study was a study of the colors in the background and the transitions wet and wet between sky and grass and trees. I thought I needed a little bit of preparation just to figure out the color transitions there. I also did 2 portrait studies, one small and then one larger, again to test out the colors and also really just practice the drawing. Portraits are definitely the hardest subject matter, especially when you're painting someone that you love and know really well. So it's such a good idea to practice the elements you think are going to be the hardest before you go into your big painting using your expensive supplies. Also, while I was painting this, I referred to my thumbnail sketches almost constantly. I was looking back and forth between my reference photo and those sketches the entire time, and they really did help guide my decisions while I painted. One more thing, even if you do mess up on your nice surface, there are a couple things you can do to fix it. Use a coat of white watercolor ground to cover the problem area and paint over it. Re-wet the area and smooth it out or lift the paint gently. This is an important one. Work past the ugly phase and see your painting through to the end. Don't give up on it. And lastly, if your painting does warp and buckle, you can actually smooth it out by ironing it. For more about how to do this, check out this video. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more videos about how to fix mistakes in watercolor, and tell me about your own experiences with working on expensive surfaces. For me, using the good stuff, the best quality papers, makes the painting experience so much more pleasurable, and my results are usually better. I say usually, there's always still a risk of a failed painting, even after doing lots of preparation. But here's the good news. Those are the paintings you ultimately learn the most from. When you have a failed painting, don't think of it as wasted supplies or money thrown away. Think of it as a gained experience and more tools in your artist tool belt. It's all about perspective. Speaking of failed paintings, check out this next video and I'll see you over there.